We've heard this term balanced a couple times here, and maybe I have a slightly different definition of that. In my mind, what we need to do right now is balance what we're seeing in the private sector with what we're seeing in the public sector. And very clearly, 20+% spending increases is not even close to the reality of the private sector, although I guess if you would average out a 20+% increase in public sector spending and maybe the 20+% decreases that we've seen in private sector incomes, net worths, and spending, maybe that's your definition of balance, but it isn't mine. And I'm curious, I haven't seen the latest runs off of the governor's revised budget proposal, but I remember what it was in the original February forecast, or the original budget that the governor put out in February. And a very small percent was actually cuts. Do you know what the actual dollar number of cuts are? And I know there were some cuts and some increases that netted out to about $480 or $90 million. But what's the dollar of cuts that the governor is proposing right now?
Either Commissioner Franz or Assistant Commissioner or
Chair
Commissioner
David,
Franz.
I don't have that figure in front of me, Representative Downey, what the actual cut number is. I'll get that for you, but I don't have that in front of me right now.
Assistant Commissioner, or can we get that to Representative Downey? Okay, Representative Downey.
Well, Mr. Chair, and to the testifiers, I don't know whether it's 400 million or 700 million. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in there. I haven't seen any additional cuts proposed. But clearly, we're talking about a $5.1 billion deficit and maybe, 10% in cuts and 90% in tax increases and shifts and consuming reserves. And I don't know about anybody else here, but you can use whatever definition of balance you want, but that is not a balanced approach. I mean, the thought that somehow that's balanced in the public's eye based on their own personal experiences, let's be accurate when we talk about balance. Anybody else in this room thinks about balance, and I think they would see the scales being even. And I wouldn't support a 50-50 tax increase and spending cut proposal because I think the public sector is just massively imbalanced with regard to the private sector right now. But to come out here and even pretend by any definition that what is being proposed here is balanced, I mean, it goes beyond any definition that any one of us would accept. So I got more questions. There's some things here in the tax incidents write-up from the research department at the Department of Revenue, but we can go into that later and let the testifiers get in. But let's not kid ourselves about a balanced approach here, members. This is an unbelievably imbalanced approach, and it is excessively imbalanced when you compare that to the ordinary, everyday experience of people around this state.
Assistant Commissioner Massman.
Mr. Chair and members, Matt Massman from the Department of Revenue. Just to kind of, and I don't exactly, there's been a couple of numbers, the 22% and you know, I don't exactly know how some of those numbers are being calculated. I believe that the balance of the governor's revenue and spending changes is about 45-55, and we can get you that precise number. But I think, you know, there's obviously just, you know, to kind of put a little context on that, there's obviously a number of things that can be included or not included in how changes in spending and revenues are calculated from one biennium to the next. I think a couple of things that are in play in this conversation. Certainly there's changes in the education area that have historically always been considered spending changes. That is where they show up in our budget area. I think the other thing in terms of the baseline from one biennium to the next, it's important, I think, to understand that we have in the previous biennium or the biennium we're in right now and ending, and these are, you know, I think good questions for Commissioner Showalter as well as that the state received a lot of one-time money in that biennium that resulted in lower general fund spending. So what you have is a comparison point where you have a lower base, not because the state was not providing services necessarily in those areas, but because we were funding those services with one-time resources from federal funds and others. So in terms of the comparison to what the service level change is from one reference point to another, I'm pretty sure that it's not 22%. I'm pretty sure it's much less than that, and we can get the exact number.
Representative Downey.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members, we can tie ourselves up in knots with all of the fiscal sleight of hand that goes on down here at state government. But bottom line is, we got a $5.1 billion deficit. I'm guessing we got maybe $500 million of cuts, and the rest of it is coming from somewhere else. And so when we talk about balance, let's not be deceived by the idiosyncrasies of state government accounting. Bottom line, $5.1 billion budget deficit, maybe $500 million in cuts. We'll get that confirmed. That is not balanced, and everybody out there watching knows it.